It is that time of the week, and we get the camera and focus in on Athens, Georgia, where our man Griff is waiting. Griff, what's going on?
Getting ready for a big game, night game at Sanford Stadium. Georgia tries to extend the home win streak against a top 10 Ole Miss team. Georgia probably without their middle linebacker, Jamon Dumas-Johnson, suffered a broken forearm. Brock Bowers, probably more likely than not likely to play. So a lift for the Dogs there. But big picture, Paul, I got to thinking about what this game really means. And yes, on the one hand, people that are watching it are seeing history. It's going to be a long time before somebody wins 26 in a row or 27 in a row when you start talking about a 12-team playoff and transfers and NILs and portal. You know, but for one more night, you're going to get to see a traditional program in Georgia that has only 3 transfers on their whole roster against an Ole Miss team that has 31 and 28 in the 2 deep. And what are you pulling for? Are you pulling for the old model where a guy like Carson Beck stays in the program for a few years, waits his turn, finally gets his opportunity, or do you go for what Lane has done, what he has to do at a program like Ole Miss, and go out and sign all these free agents? And like I said, 28 transfers in the 2 deep, quarterbacks coming in from all the different schools every year, auditioning for the job at Ole Miss. Do you go for the old school Bulldogs and the way Kirby's done it the old-fashioned way, or do you like the shortcuts that you see now with the transfer portal? And that's what fans are going to have to weigh Saturday night when they're watching Georgia against this red-hot Ole Miss team.
Interesting. As we talk to Griff live from Athens. Griff, let me bounce around the SEC a little bit because there's certainly some other stories and other things people are watching. Alabama fans this week feel disrespected. They feel like their ranking is too low. What do you think?
I think you should have beaten Texas on September 9th in Tuscaloosa. I was there. And listen, I'm right there among a lot of people that believe Nick Saban is the greatest coach of this generation with his 6. I guess Kirby won 4 of those national titles with him and has 2. But right now you got to give it to Saban for what he's done over time. But, Paul, you can't escape it. They lost at home to Texas and at home in Tuscaloosa, and they're going to be pinned behind a 1-loss Texas team. I talked to Boo Corrigan about it on the call. I said, these transitive properties, how long do they last? And he basically said, look, that's an important game. And the replacement quarterback for Quinn Ewers at Texas, he's playing really well. How do you not keep Texas above Alabama if they both have 1 loss, all things being equal, and Texas beat Bama head-to-head? Now, the only way this becomes relevant is if Bama runs the table and beats Georgia. I suppose Tennessee is still mathematically in the hunt in the East. If Bama runs the table and wins the SEC, could they be left out with 1 loss? And the answer is yes, because if Washington stays undefeated and there's an undefeated Big Ten champion and there's an undefeated Florida State and it boils down to a 1-loss Texas and a 1-loss Bama, what do you do? Well, you can make the argument that Bama just knocked off Georgia. But to me, that head-to-head matchup, Nick Saban did not have his team ready. The offensive coordinator did not have Jalen Milroe playing well yet. They had a fantastic home crowd. They didn't take advantage. They wet the bed at home, and they got to pay the price. They got to hold their breath and hope that somebody beats Texas. Kansas State was very close, but couldn't finish last week.
Talking to Griff, Griff, I want to get to another story that took a wicked turn Saturday at home, and you know where I'm going here. That's the situation with your guy. You like him a lot. He's a good guy. He works hard, getting more sleep now. We're speaking of Billy Napier heading down to the Bayou this weekend.
Well, it's a big game for Florida. Obviously, they're a double-digit underdog, and I guess we'll see Chris Doering dressed like a turkey or something if he loses the bet. I don't know. You know, him and Peter Burns have that LSU-Florida bet going. But bigger matters, big issues for Florida, because here's the thing. The Florida administration is dug in. And if there's enough boosters with enough money, they can undig those administrators and get new ones if they want a new head coach and the administration doesn't go along with it. Paul, I think it's too early still. I think you got to give Billy Napier time. This is a big game. Let's see what he does. This is a banged-up LSU team. They got beat up. I mean, the Tide took them to the shed and physically dominated, knocked the quarterback out. Alabama showed you why they're superior. For all the bells and whistles and points that LSU scored, Alabama is the toughest, most physical team in the league, and they took it out on the Tigers. So let's see what the Tigers have left. and let's see how the Gators fight for their coach. I want to see how they respond, Paul. And listen, I'm not on some death watch for Billy Napier's job. I think it's premature. I'd rather talk about guys that are getting it done and that have impressed me. I'd rather talk about Eli Drinkowitz. I'd rather talk about Josh
you did
Heupel.
that. You did that last week, and 2 weeks ago you insulted Eli Drinkwitz.
Well, it was warranted. Now, he's not going to be the SEC Coach of the Year like a lot of people wanted, and he did apologize to the referees for some language apparently that was caught on TV. But listen, he's got a doggone good football team. Now, if they can keep Tennessee from scoring 60 points, they got a chance. And a lot of people might chuckle, but the Vols have put up 128 points on Missouri. Josh Heupel is very underrated. I'm really surprised we don't hear any talk about him possibly being Coach of the Year. I mean, if they run the table and Georgia stumbles against Ole Miss, Tennessee would go to the SEC championship. There's a scenario. If Tennessee beats Missouri and Georgia loses to Ole Miss, Georgia's got to go to Tennessee with the East on the line. Listen, Josh Heupel has done an unbelievable job. He lost his quarterback and Hendon Hooker and had to replace him, and they lost their best receiver. And here's Tennessee leading the SEC in rushing and rush defense.
Griff, that sounds great. Why don't we wait till next week before we have this conversation? Because they have to deal with Missouri, which won't be easy.
Well, it won't be easy, and it's a big game for Drink. I mean, listen, I was so impressed, Paul. When you were watching that game, if they didn't have the uniforms on, you couldn't tell who the defending national champion was and who the team was, from the Show Me State. Missouri played them toe-to-toe, and then their quarterback made a fatal mistake, and Georgia's culture and coaching won out. Georgia's coaching won that game, okay? I know they're a talented program, but we just went over the whole transfer portal.
I'm done with that game. Is there any other coach you want to praise here while we have a few extra minutes? I don't want to step on your script.
Well, there's no script. I just feel like this SEC conference is fantastic, and teams have been getting better and better and better. And I look at Missouri and Tennessee and these coaches, to me, two of the finest coaches in the country right now. That's a really big game in Columbia. And then here's Saturday night. Lane Kiffin and what he's done. I mean, this is back-to-back years. They've been 8-1. I think 3 straight years they've been in the top 10. That's not supposed to happen in Oxford, Mississippi. They don't really have the budget for that. But Lane has gotten it done, and you have to give him a lot of credit. And it's just going to be an unbelievable atmosphere in Athens Saturday night. And it's kind of for us in the media, I'll do a little sidebar here. The press box behind me, Paul, and I know a lot of people don't care, but I got to tell you, this has been the best press box in the country for years and years and years. It's the last game for the media to see at midfield in an open air. It's going to be special for a lot of media guys like me here at Sanford Stadium.
Hold on, Griff.
It's going to be disappointing.
I agree. It's a great
that.
Press conference. What's happening to that press conference?
Well, they're moving the press box. This is going to be it. They're closing it down, and if you donate a lot of money, you get those seats, and maybe that's the way it's supposed to be. So this is for the media guys. A shout out to Claude Felton and Georgia for giving us the best press box in the country.
And where will you be sitting next year?
We will have the view from the corner of the end zone, which affords some strategic sight lines. Josh Brooks has promised us that it's going to be one of the best press boxes in the nation still.
Is that
Alabama?
Help me with this, because it's been a while since I hung around press boxes. But is that where most of the press boxes have gone?
It is. And listen, nobody roots for the media. I get that. Everybody's like, who cares?
Why should Griff? Why should they? Why should they?
Why should they? Because they should.
I'm being very honest. As somebody who did what you're doing for many, many years and respected, but why should anybody care where the media sits when they're getting a free ticket into the game, free parking pass, all the free hot dogs they can gobble down, all the peanuts, all the free Cokes? I mean, why should we feel sorry for you?
Nobody said anything about feeling sorry.
Well, I mean, you're acting like the world has come to an end because they're going to make you sit in the end zone with average people.
I'm trying to talk about good, warm news here, Paul. I mean, you want to bury Billy Napier before he even gets to LSU, and maybe he'll lose.
I have never said a disparaging thing. You're the one who was shoveling the dirt a couple weeks ago about the biorhythms of his nocturnal behavior.
And I kind of told you this was going to happen. Now, you sat down with Scott Strickland in Destin, and you talked to him about this. And Scott told you back in Destin when you sat down with him that he would be fine, and that's going to get put to the test. But I want to see how the Gators respond in Baton Rouge. I want to see if LSU can come off the mat. This is a 3-loss team, and I champion Brian Kelly quite a bit, but this is a 3-loss team. And that's disappointing to me, right? So I want to see how LSU
Well, yeah,
comes off the mat.
but LSU has. Show me somebody that has better losses than LSU. I mean, they played a very brutal schedule.
Is that, I haven't heard you. I've never
I mean,
seen
while
you write that in
Georgia
the column.
was playing Ball State, they were playing Florida State.
Yeah, well, good for them. They scheduled it. Georgia scheduled Oklahoma, and unfortunately, Oklahoma and Georgia decided not to play that game. But now Georgia's got to prove it, Paul. You got to admit, the Dogs have got to stretch. They're playing a Missouri team in the top 15. They got an Ole Miss team at number 9. They got a Tennessee team. Nobody can complain about Georgia's remaining schedule. They got to run a gauntlet there with those 3 programs in the top 15, and it's going to be tough. And we're burying the lead here, though. If Brock Bowers comes back, it's going to be a lift, right? But you look at down the stretch, nobody thought Missouri was going to be a great game when we first saw the schedule.
So what is it? So let's quit burying
the
lead. Tell us more about Brock Bowers.
Brock Bowers has been practicing, and he's been running straight line speeds of 19 to 20 miles an hour, according to a teammate. There's been plenty of information coming out that this is a kid that wants to try to play. And they talk about Tua playing after 27 days of tightrope surgery. This would be 26 for Brock Bowers. I think this would cement his status as a future statue here if he's able to come back and play what will probably be his final home game at Sanford Stadium. The Georgia Dogs still streaking 26 in a row. That ties 15 and 16 Alabama, 2 behind the all-time SEC mark set by Paul Bear Bryant and Gene Stallings. 21 straight weeks now at number 1. That ties 01-02 Miami. I don't know that they'll catch USC at 32 or 33 or whatever ungodly number Pete Carroll put up, but you're seeing a historic run here. And if Brock Bowers comes back, to me, that's what puts Georgia over the top, because this is a dangerous Ole Miss team. And, Paul, you're going to know in the first quarter, because Ole Miss is destroying people in the first quarter of games. In fact, I think they have the highest point differential in the first quarter in the league. They're also the most explosive team in the SEC. So we're going to see if Georgia can slow down Ole Miss. Georgia, the last 3 games, has given up opening drive touchdowns. If Georgia holds Ole Miss out of the end zone on the opening possession, I think it's a Georgia win. If Ole Miss doesn't get the jump on the Georgia Bulldogs, it's going to be a Georgia Bulldogs Saturday night. So keep that the first quarter at 7 p.m. kickoff going to be very important. Georgia trying to get it done. If Brock Bowers is back, I think that's what puts them over the top.
Well, Griff, tell us
the
conversation that's going on behind the scenes about his health, whether he should come back, when he should come back. What's the deal?
Yeah. Well, he's first of all, he's got a clear protocol, right? I mean, Kirby's talked about the different landmarks that he has to hit. It's not just straight line speed. He's got to be able to decelerate. He's got to be able to cut. Obviously, he's got to protect himself on the field. Tight end is a very physical position. It requires a lot of different skill sets. Ron Corson is probably the best athletic trainer in the country. He worked with the SEC committee a few years ago when they were dealing with their COVID protocol. This is one of the most celebrated trainers ever. They got him from Alabama, actually, back in the Ray Goff era, and he's been here ever since. So they've got this legendary trainer that's going to keep a close eye on him. And if Brock plays, it's a game changer, because this would be the first time that Brock Bowers and Ladd McConkey are both 100%. This would be the most potent offense ever. But here's the thing. Pete Golding is going to throw the kitchen sink at these guys. They gamble, they risk, they do all these fronts and blitzes. Now, Carson Beck claims that he can solve Rubik's Cube in 1 minute, and that's great. But can he solve the Ole Miss blitz package and call the right protections? Because when Missouri was hitting him last week, Carson got a little shook up, and he was a little slow in the first half. Second half adjustments, 11-14. But this is not an Ole Miss team you want to get behind, not with this Jackson Dart character. This guy can run. He'll put the shoulder down. And they've got probably the best running back in the league in Quinshawn Judkins. This guy drives a Mercedes. I think I read in AL.com he bought a Mercedes for one of Nick Saban's dealerships. How about that? So you got a Rolls-Royce running back driving a Mercedes for Ole Miss against the Georgia defensive front that isn't as celebrated as the past and might be missing their middle linebacker. Probably will be missing their All-American middle linebacker.
Okay, Griff, before you go, I know your fans are going to come after me because I dared to ask you a few questions. But is there anything else? I don't want the Griff Navy to go hungry here on this Thursday afternoon.
No, I just think it's complete. I just think, right now I'm enjoying every week down the stretch of the SEC. This was an unpredictable script that's playing out. I know that Georgia was the heavy favorite, but now the committee says they're number 2. They're missing key players. Like I said, only 3 transfer portal guys. Ole Miss has 28 in the 2 deep. I mean, it's old school football against the replacements. And I know a lot of people like that. A lot of people like free agency. But there's a lot of college football traditionalists that I think will be rooting for Georgia to win this game. And it would also keep the picture clean. I mean, if Georgia runs the table and they're undefeated, you know you got an SEC team in there. You can't count on Alabama.
Griff, I want to be a reporter for a second because, back in the day, I'd get a story, I'd call the person and go over the main salient facts. The one salient fact that I took away here, and I think is going to come back and be regurgitated, and please confirm whether I heard you correctly. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're talking about Alabama, and you said Alabama wet the bed against Texas. Is that? Did I get that correctly?
Yeah, I was there. I saw it with my own two eyes. Absolutely. They were at home, and they lost to Texas.
AL.com headline, Griff says Alabama wet the bed. We are going to see you next week. Thanks so much, Griff. Back with much more after this.